This Renault Grand Scenic here isn't grand at all. The alternator's not working. So let's see if we can get it fixed. Sticking a meter across the battery in this car shows it's only at 11.4 volts with the engine running. Typically you want to see about 14.4. Certainly up above 13.5 when there's no load on the engine. So that'll be the first point of call to see if the alternator is in fact charging or not. I've done a few basics on it. I've cleaned the battery terminals and any of the little kind of terminals attached to the battery that are easy to get at. There wasn't really any major corrosion on them. Certainly worth doing as a good starting point. And what we did is, as well, turned off the car and let the computers turn themselves off, which takes about 2 minutes. You can hear the click under the bonnet and then there's a sort of a whining noise that stops. And then after that, we disconnected the negative terminal on the battery, left it disconnected for 5 minutes, reconnected it, which would have kind of cleared any faults in the memory of the ECU. Started it up again, fault remained. So we need to look a bit further. Alright, so I did a lot of this type of work on the side of the road actually because I had to try and get it back to my garage. The car had actually broken down, so it turned out the battery had basically gone dead when they were driving it, so it wasn't going to keep going. So what I did was I brought it back and I charged up the battery, put the fully charged battery back into the car, tried it all out, still the same problem remains. So now we need to get a bit further in depth, and the first port of call, I suppose, for me would be the alternator regulator. Now I have it on good authority that the Vallejo regulators aren't generally the thing to give trouble. Yes, the brushes can give trouble in them, and you can get the brushes changed by an auto electrician without getting into the thing of replacing the whole alternator. But I know that that's not the problem in this car, and we need to change the alternator. The reason being is, if you look down here at the alternator, which is not the easiest thing in the world to see, if you look down there, in between where all the windings are on the alternator itself, you can see it's a blackened, charred mess in there. And that means the alternator is unfortunately fried. Why this happened is anybody's guess, but to be honest with you, I'd say there was a battery drain on this car, which kept on killing the battery, and it was being jump started and been driven again straight away. And I'd say there was a lot of load on the alternator trying to charge a dead battery all the time. Just a working theory, I don't know, but to be honest with you, it doesn't really matter anyway, one way or another. This is a full on 5 spanner rating if you're to go by the Hayton's manual category, because this is a big job on this car. So there's nothing for it but to get stuck in. First off, we need to remove the front bumper. Not even joking. So let's get the T15 Torx bolts out along the top, of which there are 6. Okay, now there is 2 in each side of the wheel arches at the front. There's not a great deal of rolling around on the floor involved in this job, so I haven't really bothered actually putting it up on the ramp or anything like that. You know, to be honest with you, raising it up and lowering it down on the ramp would take more time than it would save. So anyway, with all those bolts free, the bumper should now be free to come off as well. So we're going to just gently kind of work our way around it. And the front bumper will come off. Now there will be an electrical connector for the fog lights on one side, so we'll just disconnect that now as well, and that gets the front bumper out of the way. There we go. So that is the front bumper off. Not really a big job, to be honest with you, in that front, but it has to be understood that on modern cars the front bumper is really just a trim panel. The actual bumper is here, and this car has been crashed before by the looks of things. So anyway, look, that's neither here nor there. Next thing we need to do is we need to take off there is a plastic panel along here, and I'm just looking to see what's involved. We're going to have to take off the headlights first, so let's get them out. They shouldn't be too difficult either, it should be just 4 bolts. And indeed that is correct. There's one of the bolts there, another one up there, and then down the front you have 2 down the very bottom here, just above the deformation panel. Actually, I'm not sure it has been crashed actually. That looks like maybe it's supposed to be like that. Anyway, look, as I said, it doesn't matter. These are 10mm, by the way. Okay, so 4 bolts are out. That leaves the light unit free to come out, and this piece here as well for some reason. Not entirely sure why, but it's out now anyway. So it's kind of just hooked up on a plastic peg at the back. Now we're going to have two electrical connectors to take off on this. Alright, there's one headlight unit out now. I just have to get the other one out. Look at the size of this bloody thing when you take it out of the car. God almighty. Okay, next we need to take off the radiator top support. Now don't worry, we don't need to take the radiator out, okay? So that's going to be staying where it is, but the radiator support does need to come out. So let's get an impact going onto them. You don't have an impact gun, it's not the end of the world. I just do, so I'm going to use it. Just use a spanner or a ratchet. But to be honest with you, they're so cheap that if you're doing enough stuff on cars, buy one for yourself. Now, I can just take this off here. Gives a bit of wriggle room with the radiator, which we can now unhook from the radiator support. I think. Get that out of there. It just kind of unclips from the front of the radiator. That's you have there's the radiator. That's your aircon condenser, and down below is the intercooler. Just going to take off this 10mm bolt here as well, which is just holding the pipe down to the intercooler on, and we'll be disconnecting the intercooler pipe now in a moment as well, which is held on by a clip. So for the time being, let's just see how we are doing for access. If I don't have to take off this whole plastic piece actually goes down behind the radiator, I only realised. So if we can actually leave it without taking that off, then so much the better. Ow. See, where we're at the moment is this is holding this plastic piece on, which is attached to the back of this, which is all part of this one unit. So I'm thinking if we actually undo the front deformation bar and allow this whole thing to kind of fall forward, that'll give us the access we need to the alternator down below, and we can start actually unbuttoning that. This particular YouTuber does not like Renaults. If you want a reliable car, in my opinion, don't buy a Renault, because they are a heap of dirt. That's what I think anyway. To be honest, they're synonymous with electrical trouble actually, and this is case in point. Alright, now let's see how we're looking. That's our deformation panel unbolted, so that'll just fall away. Now, what I'm going to try and do is leave everything connected as much as is possible. There's a few little clips we're just going to need to undo for the wiring harness. I'll probably just even leave that down like that. That'll be alright. Now, how are we looking? Okay, more rubbish removed to get at a simple part. So now I'm going to get that intercooler pipe off. There's just a wire clip that goes through these tubes, and you literally just pull it off, pull it out with the pliers, and that allows you to remove the pipe. And there we have it. Okay, so I'm going to take it off completely because it's still in the way of the alternator. Alright, there we go. There was a bolt that needed to be removed there as well, just to that supports the pipe up the engine end. Jesus, if this is changing an alternator, I'd hate to be changing an engine in this car. Now let's see. I'm just thinking, if we actually undo the bolt down here, that will allow this whole support structure to actually just drop away and give us loads of access. So let's try that, see what happens. It's all just bolts, folks, you know. I mean, it's not the end of the world. If you have to take out a bolt, if you take out a bolt and you have to put it back in, then so what? Like, it doesn't really make a difference. Now, I would say just be mindful that you don't stress any piping. So now, let's have a look and see. So that should allow us to drop the whole front clip off the car for all the world. Jeez, and I thought doing an alternator in a Beetle was a pain in the arse. This takes the biscuit. Right, so there's the aircon condenser. Oh, that's gone. Oh, there it is there. Okay, so it's worth noting at this point that I'm 35 minutes into this job to get access to the alternator, which actually isn't all that big a deal, to be honest with you. I mean, we're making good headway here. So now we actually have access to the alternator, and I can show you a little bit closer what I mean about the fact that it's fried. It's badly done up. So we shall set about actually removing it. Now, first thing we need to do is actually get the auxiliary belt off. So that's going to be the next thing we do. Let's be realistic here. Access was never going to be amazing even after we'd done all of this, but like that's just to pull that forward by about maybe 3 inches. You see all the fibres and everything coming out of the alternator. That's a sure sign that that alternator is bunched. So, how exactly that happened, as I said, I don't fully understand. But there you go. It happened, so it needs replacing. Now I have to take the wheel off because we need to get the belt tensioner. Did I tell you I hate Renaults? To be fair, most modern cars are like this nowadays. It's a bloody nuisance, and I knew this was going to happen. Oh. It's no wonder modern cars don't come with a spare wheel, because you can't get the bastard wheel off when it comes to it anyway. So now I have to try and get a lump hammer or something and knock the bloody thing off. Ah yeah, we'll keep going. Pain in the sack this is. Right, there we go. Oh. Right, okay, now we need to get the wheel arch liner off. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 plastic little doofers there that need to be taken out. So let's get them out. There's one of the little plastic doofers. That's what they're called. So you go into motor factors and say, can I get some wheel arch doofers? And that's what you'll get. But anyway, right, so that's 1 of 4. They literally just have to you just have to pull them out. There's no easy way about it. So it turns out it's split in 2, so you only need to take half of it out, which is grand, but I've got the whole thing anyway. Right, so there is a tensioner up there. I'm going to show you it now. So there's the crankshaft pulley there, and up above it to the right is the tensioner pulley with its spring mechanism. And you can see here there is a 16mm hex on it. That's not a bolt, actually. It's literally just something to throw a wrench onto. And what you do is you turn it anti-clockwise, and that twists the pulley around and takes the tension off the belt. So that's what we're going to do now. And the belt comes out. Unless you're replacing the belt, and it probably is a good idea to replace it if you're doing this job, you don't need to take it off all the pulleys. Just unhook it from the alternator and you can leave it draped over the rest of the pulley so you kind of know which way it goes. Now finally we are at the point of removing the alternator. Now you can see down there is a bolt at the top of it, and there's another corresponding bolt down the bottom. There's no sliders or anything like that because the tensioning is done by the tensioner, obviously, as we've just removed it. And over here we have our electrical connection for the excitation and control, and then the output is down beside it. Now, make sure, and I cannot stress this enough, that the battery is disconnected before you go any further, okay? You should have disconnected it at the start of this job. If you haven't done it, do it now. Really do it, because if you short something out, you're going to fry the car, you could start a fire, anything could go wrong. So really don't do it. Just make sure the battery is disconnected. Okay, so I am fortunate enough to have an electric ratchet here, so I'm going to actually buzz out these bolts and then we can actually have a look at the electrical connectors on the back of this as well afterwards. So let's see how this goes. Alright. So I'm just going to unthread them and just leave them where they are. Okay, well actually I can take one of them out at least. So that's a big long bolt there that goes right through the alternator. And there's one down the bottom as well. We'll get that out. Then I have to try and figure out how we're going to get the bloody alternator itself out of here. I'm just going to be testing the pliability of some of the hoses, I think. Alright. So I was kind of able to get it from below, but probably a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. So I get my big meat fists down in here. It's actually finger tight now. Great, so we just that's just above finger tight. It's always the way, isn't it? Alright, so that's free now. I'm just going to leave it in the hole so that'll support things there for me while I take everything else off. So we're going to get our electrical connectors off first, and then we can get, so that one of them is a clip-on connector, and then our main output is a what looks like a 10mm nut. I'll have a look now in a second. Alright, so the main output is on the back, obviously, and is a what looks to be a 13mm, and there is either one thing or another in the way, so it's going to be just a case of fumbling my way through it until I get there. You know, I used to live in France many moons ago. I lived there for about a year. They're absolutely mad for French cars over there for reasons I can't fully understand, especially when they're right beside Germany. Not that I have much faith in some German cars either, to tell you the truth, but I'll be better than this. Like, what I mean is, not every country you go to has such brand loyalty as France does towards French cars. Don't get me wrong, I would love a Renault Alpine. They were great cars when they were numbering them. Renault 5s, 11s, 14s, 12s, all of them. Brilliant cars. Renault Grand Scenic, grand load of bollocks. Now, this is going to be where the fun starts. So, just basically, once you've got the bolts out, you need to just pry it out. Alright, that's it free now. So now we need to try and wiggle it out of there. Have to try and remember how we're getting this out, because we have to get the new one in the same way. I wonder if I take this bracket off, will it allow me to get it out a bit easier? I think it might. Yeah, let's do that. Now that's off. Little electrical connector there, which I'm afraid of breaking. Come on, out you get, you little bugger. There we go. Right. Okay, so here's the old alternator, and you can see all this rubbish coming out of it. Now, the other thing I've noticed, and this could have really screwed us up completely, the pulley on this has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ribs on it, and this pulley's only got 5. Now that's obviously the same alternator as that. However, if the mounting is different, it ain't gonna fit. This one's off a Capture rather than a Grand Scenic, so otherwise it looks the same. But yeah, we're going to swap the pulleys over, and you need to make sure that you have the right tool for this job, because I know from Volkswagens that these type of overrun clutches actually, which is what that is, that's an overrun clutch, so is that, they have a special tool for taking them off. This is said tool, so it's a little splines gizmo which goes inside the splines, and this, you just take off the plastic cap. But what I would strongly recommend is you just try and get one that actually has the correct pulley on it from the get-go. So if you need to swap over the overrun clutches, then fine, but if you can avoid it, then better again. So I'm going to swap these out. Ideally, you'd want to be using an impact gun for doing this as well. Alright, that's that one off. So now, just put that aside. That's a handy one anyway. Now, wind this on. Alright, job's a good one. It basically stops the belt from jerking and that. So just from pulses in the alternator. So it turns one direction, but doesn't turn the other way. So that's that job done. So now this alternator should be ready to fit. Obviously, I bought this in a scrapyard because the owner didn't want to spend a huge amount of money on this job. So this was €80. The new alternator in the motor factors would have been €270. So a bit of a price difference there anyway. So yeah, I can kind of understand it, to tell you the truth. All right, so let's try and get this installed now. Should be fun. So once we can get it down into the space, that's half the battle. All right, so I have the bottom bracket lined up here now. And try and get the bolt into it. It's as fiddly as hell trying to get the bolt in, by the way. Or to get the brackets lined up. Simply because of the fact that it's very tight going onto the bushes. So now, if we get the top one in first, it might be easier. Alright, so they are in and started. So let's try and screw them home. I won't finish that all the way. I'm just going to see if we can get the bottom one in first. Right. That's it in and bolted up. That took far too much effort. So, yeah, trying to get the alternator in onto those bushes took a long time. So, I actually had to take it out and just give them another little tickle and get them because there was no way they were going on the way they were. So now I'm going to get the alternator connected up electrically, and we're going to get the belt onto it. And we're going to get some of the stuff put back together, but not everything. Just enough so that we can test it and make sure it's working. And once we know that, then we can start putting the rest of the car back together. Okay. Now, that's the main power feeder connected. And we're going to get our little excitation connection on. That's that. There's actually only one wire on this one. There's some of them have two wires. This one's actually just a one. So it's not, it literally just has the field windings. So the field windings are basically how the alternator is controlled. The more power is supplied to the field windings, the more power it generates. So anyway, that's that. So now let's get the belt on. Okay, so at this juncture, we have the alternator now in. So the last thing to do before we can kind of start putting things back together again is to get the belt back onto the alternator. And actually what I'm going to do then is connect up the battery just to check everything over and see if the alternator is actually working. So we're going to start the engine. Now it's going to throw up all sorts of faults, okay, we know that, but that's all right. It's there's various things on the inlet and everything like that are all disconnected. So we can clear those faults anyway. I have a fault code reader I can do that with. And yeah, so belt back on now. I strongly recommend making a very careful note as to how the serpentine belt goes on, because if you forget, like I did, it's going to take you bloody ages to figure it out. But anyway, it's back on again. So yeah, the other little thing I will show you is how to lock the tensioner pulley into place while you're trying to get the belt on. And you'll see here where I have the 16mm socket on the breaker bar, but you'll also see in behind it there is something that looks very suspiciously like a masonry nail, and that's exactly what that is. So it just goes into a hole there, and when it's in the hole, it locks it into place. So that gets you to the correct position to be able to get the belt on quite easily. So that's done now anyway, thank God. So I'm going to take the nail out and I'm going to put the tension on the belt, and then we are going to try it out. Okay, so what we're going to do here now to start with is we're going to measure the battery voltage before it's connected. See what we're actually at. 12.15. Okay, so that's fine. Now what we're going to do is we're going to connect this very gingerly, and we're going to make sure that nothing is shorting out or anything like that. You'll know because a big spark will come from the battery and sparks will start flying and everything as well, but that all seems okay. So let's check the voltage now. Okay, so there we go. So it's dropping off a little bit. That's fair enough, okay. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start the engine, and I want to see that up at around 14 volts, in or around. And we'll see how we're looking. Well, hey, we're in business, folks. That is a charging battery. So there we go, we're up at 14 volts. That's brilliant. Okay, let's turn it off and get the rest of the car put together. Okay, so I'm going to start by putting the wheel arch liner back on and get the wheel back on. I'll do them up with the breaker bar once it's back on its wheels. Right. Land sale tyres. Heavens to Murgatroyd. Best ditch finders. Anyway, I'll be saying it to the owner. Get this intercooler pipe on now. I'll just leave that bottom pipe off for the moment. Still want to try and get a few more bits and pieces put together here first. Get that top bracket in there as well. Yeah. Alright, now I've got the intercooler duct in, and I'm going to put the deformation panel on now. Alright, so now that we have that done, we can get this plastic panel bolted back into place. Common statement by people that you have to take the front bumper off Renault Megane to change the fog light bulb and stuff like that. Taking the front bumper off is actually not that big a job, to tell you the truth. So I can kind of see why they went around it that way, rather than cutting the fingers off yourself trying to get in at it somewhere else where it would be inaccessible. So, not that I'm justifying Renault's motives or anything like that, but that one actually makes a lot of sense. The size of the bumper, don't mind. Bloody hell. It is something of a behemoth. Well, so the car is now back together, and for reasons I don't fully understand, although the battery is charging and I've proved it with the multimeter, it's still showing up on the dashboard that there is a charging fault. So I don't know why that is. I imagine it's just a legacy fault stored in the ECU somewhere. I'm going to have to look into how to actually clear that fault now, because it is definitely charging. We know that now. It's sitting at 14.2 volts, which is absolutely perfect, especially at idle actually. So the reason I'm still getting that fault is because there is this little thing called a battery management unit, which is another little pain in the arse that Renault decided to include in their car. And on the side of it is a 5 amp fuse. It's down there, right down beside it, which is nigh on impossible to get at because everything else is in the way. Again, because Renault. And yeah, basically that's what's causing your problem. So that 5 amp fuse needs replacing. The fuse is nigh on impossible to see or get to, but down the side of this unit, when you get it out far enough, you will see a little, well, you'll feel a little black rubber grommet, and you need to pull off that rubber grommet, and underneath is said fuse. It turns out it was blown in this car, so I've now got a new one installed, and I'm going to try and get all this gubbins back together. Did I mention how much I hate bloody Renaults? Alright, that's reinstalled now. So the trick there to stop that fuse blowing is if you're reconnecting the battery, you need to make sure that that plug there is off. And then you put your negative post on and then you connect the plug. I don't know why, but that's the way it is. So let's start it up and see if it works now. Oh God! Right. More digging to do. Right folks, I threw a strop last night when that fault came back up again, so I had to walk away from it before I gave the car a boot or something like that. Anyway, right, I'm going to get the battery out and see if I can get the battery box out and get better access to that battery control module, because I do actually think that that's now what's at fault. So let's see how we get on with that. Okay, so my understanding on what this is a distribution block with fuses in it, okay? So there's a single bus bar going in and then all these wires coming out the bottom. So rather than trying to open it anymore, I'm going to just, I don't like doing this, but stab through the insulation with the meter and make sure we've got continuity between each line. Like, okay, there's continuity through all of those. As I said, not the way I would have liked to have done it, but in order to retain my sanity, or at least what's left of it, at least we know that the fuses in there are all alright. The fuse in this is okay. I'm going to clean up the terminals in this and we're going to put it all back together and we're going to try again. Alright, the whole battery tray is back together again now. I've cleaned up all the connections and all we can do now is give it a go and see what happens. I mean, look, just make sure there's one connector down there. Alright, okay, let's throw the battery into it and see what happens. I always do the positive first, so at least that way then if you touch off the bodywork when you're tightening it, it's not going to short anything out, and then you can do the negative afterwards. Alright, just put the negative terminal back on here now. I'm going to try first without the little grey plug on the negative here. And then we'll try it with it if it doesn't work. Alright, now that's everything connected. Let's see if it starts and if it gives the fault. Oh, God. Still coming up. Right, battery charging fault is coming up even when the engine isn't running, right? So it can't be the alternator because the alternator is not doing anything. It's not alternating. So, right, I need to put the thinking cap on here. Right, so you'll see now what I've done is I've actually connected a battery charger to the battery, because I'm wondering, is the situation that there's too high an internal resistance in the battery, or the battery, there's too big a voltage drop when we turn it on, and that battery is actually toast, because that battery has been cycled, has had the life cycled out of it over the last while, so it may need a new battery as well. So let's just try it and see if the fault comes up with the battery charger connected, because if it doesn't, then I think we might be on the right path. Still coming up. Said the tree to the lumberjack, I'm stumped. You know, I'm going to have to be honest, folks, this has kind of gotten the better of me in a certain respect. Yes, I have the alternator in and it's now charging, which is more than it was doing before, so it is drivable, but that charging system fault I just cannot get to the bottom of. I think it's probably the controller module there is maybe faulty, but I'm not loading up the parts cannon on behalf of the person who owns this car and just throwing money at it for the sake of throwing money at it. She wants to get rid of it anyway in the next few months, so I'm just going to say to her, look, it's all right to drive as it is, and when they trade it, when she does trade it in, then they can sort out the problem in the dealership, because I think I probably need one of those plug-in doohickeys that they have in the dealership to actually fix it, and I don't have one of them. So anyway, look, we're going to leave it there. I think it's a successful failure, or a failure success, whatever way you want to look at it. At least anyway, you know how to change an alternator in a Renault Scenic, and I hope the video was of some use to you. So thanks very much for watching. Please do hit the subscribe button before you go, and I will keep you updated with my progress on other cars. Thanks for watching.